For 40 years, the Right Livelihood Foundation has been honoring and supporting courageous change makers for a better future. And this year, 2020, has been a really challenging one for most of us. But to overcome obstacles and to find alternative solutions is also our passion at the Right Livelihood Foundation, and certainly for our laureates. So we're very happy to be celebrating the 2020 laureates in digital webinars, and we invite all of you to also register for the digital award presentation on the 3rd of December.
Activist from the Mosquito ethnic group in Nicaragua. She has taken the plight of Indigenous and Afro-descendant communities all the way to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights and won. Indigenous communities around the world, but especially in Latin America, face a multitude of threats. From land grabs and exploitation of their natural resources to violence, endangering their very existence. In Nicaragua, indigenous communities are harassed by armed settlers who use the land to ranch cattle and harvest wood. The environment is often destroyed because of the state's promotion of extractive industries. Indigenous groups are pushed out of their lands. Through the use of international and domestic law, Cunningham has secured indigenous land rights in Nicaragua, pioneering legal strategies that have been successfully used by indigenous communities around the world. She has also shown that the protection of indigenous land is instrumental to the protection of local ecosystems. Despite threats and intimidation, Lottie Cunningham remains unwavering in her commitment to empowering and protecting indigenous communities.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anuradha Mittal. I'm the Executive Director of the Oakland Institute, and today incredibly proud to be hosting this webinar, Standing Up for Human Courage. We just saw this beautiful presentation on video, and it is my pleasure to introduce Lottie Cunningham, President of the Center for Justice and Human Rights of the Atlantic Coast of Nicaragua. As we heard, a Mosquito lawyer, Lottie has tirelessly worked over the decades for the rights of Indigenous and Afro-descendant peoples in Nicaragua to their land and resources as they face violence from colonials as well as national and multinational corporations. This work has not come without threats and intimidation, but her commitment to her people and to the struggle for land rights remains unwavering. It is an honor to have Lottie Cunningham with us today, Right Livelihood Award laureate in 2020. Congratulations, Lottie. And before we start our conversation, because we have two other very special guests with us, I give the floor to you to share some words. To you, Lottie.
Thank you, Anuradha. Pasta ora yang lay kulayabis nan almukinanira makabis na wan uplikaninara aisaya. I want to express my gratitude to the organizer of this event, particularly to the Rights Livelihood Foundation and the panelists who accompany me. And I said in my language, I asked my ancestor to give me permission to share the situation of my people. I was raised in a mosquito village named Bilhuascarma, Rio Coco, in the Mosquitia, Nicaragua. I was raised by my grandmother with other 11 grandchildren. My grandma, who taught me to be this indigenous woman, to struggle for my people rights and for Mother Nature. When I was small, I used to hear my grandma speak with the trees. When the trees don't give fruit, she would go to this tree and speak with the tree. And she will come and tell the tree that he came to this earth to provide food, and he must provide food. She passed her years protecting the trees. She chose to protect the tree with clean water, providing clean water and organic compost, so they would provide fruit to us. She taught us to give to the trees, and the tree will give to us. As indigenous peoples, this is what we believe about Mother Nature. Now I would like to share with you all the situation that my people are facing. Nicaragua is in a deep human rights crisis, and in the past 10 years has been restrict citizens' expression, closing public spaces, and accelerating a process of institutional deterioration. This process have had a huge impact on indigenous people and Afro-descendants people on the Caribbean coast of Nicaragua. Indigenous people and Afro-descendants live in 304 villages in 23 territories. 90% of our territory face a massive invasion. Most of these invasions is settlers and armed settlers. These settlers cut down our forests, mine our minerals, and ranch cattle on our lands. They are pushing us off our farmlands and out of our village. This is a human rights crisis. The invasion is undermining our culture and a global climate system. Mosquito people have taken care of the Mosquitia forests and rivers for many years, but the settlers are destroying the forests and poison the rivers. The settlers do not share indigenous values or culture, and they are not respecting the indigenous people practices. The Liwa Mairin, this is the spirit of the rivers and the ocean, who we call Mermaid. I like to share this story because this is part of our culture. But the rivers has been poisoned, so the Liwa Mairin is dying. We are the guardians of the forest and to protect our river. And we must be allowed to continue our culture for the well-being of the global climate. In the last 5 years, in just 12 communities of these 304 villages, the land grabbing has taken away more than 28,000 of hectares of indigenous farmlands. In addition, my people have lost access to area where they carry out their traditional activities like hunting, fishing, and collecting traditional medicines. My people are dying of hunger. We are in a humanitarian crisis. The suffering and violence that indigenous communities have faced in recent years due to the loss of their territories, the restriction of their mobility due to the forced displacement, the destruction of the environment, and the violation of their self-determination, to a humanitarian crisis that put at risk the survival of my people and the Caribbean coast of Nicaragua. Now, my peoples are suffering under the armed land grabbing. Also, we has been suffering with the COVID pandemic. And now, two direct hurricanes have wiped away houses, farms, animals, crops, and stored foods. Never before in human history has the Earth climate system been so threatened. As indigenous people, we fight for Mother Nature, and our concern is the injustice of a corrupt state like Nicaragua that doesn't respect its own laws. However, I feel optimistic about the teaching of my ancestor from generation to generation of living in harmony with Mother Nature. This prompts me to continue the fight and achieve the dream of my people so that one day social justice prevails, self-determination, and the management of our own territory. Thank you. I am open to exchange with you all.
Thank you, Lottie. Thank you for your inspirational, courageous words to get us started. A reminder to our audience who are watching this on Facebook as well as YouTube, if you have questions, please post them. Right Livelihood team will be collecting questions, and if we have time, we will love to address them as well. As I said before, we have two other special guests. So let me introduce Christophe Golay, Senior Research Fellow and Strategic Advisor on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights at the Geneva Academy, as well as Peter Larson, who works on resource governance, conservation, and social justice issues at both local and global levels. Both of them are not just incredible academic experts on social, economic, cultural rights, and indigenous rights, but have a rich experience of working with international organizations and NGOs. So to get a conversation started, I would start by saying, Lottie, you have kind of very succinctly exposed that Nicaragua, which is often seen as a world leader in granting and recognizing indigenous land rights, for instance, the country's Law 28, which established the autonomy of indigenous communities in the management of land and natural resources, or Law 445, is unfortunately nothing more than wishful thinking or a promise that has never been fulfilled. Given the plight that you have described of the Mosquito and the other indigenous communities and Afro-descendant communities in the autonomous regions, knowing what I know about the struggle, the communities have been forced to take their plight to the Inter-American Court for Human Rights. So perhaps to get a conversation started, what made the communities go to a regional mechanism when there are local courts. And I also want to open it to Christoph as well as to Peter to hear your thoughts on the presentation that Lottie just made and the questions that come to one's mind. So Lottie, if you want to address that, and then we take it to either Peter or Christoph, who wants to ask a question first.
Thank you. Even that Nicaragua has one of the broadest laws, how you said, in terms of indigenous rights, recognizing our autonomy of community in the management of their lands and natural resource, and establishing a specific the process of demarcation and titling. Everything remain in a paper promise. I always said that Nicaragua is one of the country in Latin America who has this broadest law in terms for indigenous people, but he never have a political will, and there is no concrete action to implement this compromise. We has used the legal strategic of international mechanism to in the inter-American system because there is too many impunity in the domestic law. There are lots of impunity, and the criminal system use their action to criminalize the indigenous peoples who demand the rights of their land rights, but there are no cases who has condemned the criminalization made of the murderer or the people who has been injured. We has more than 46 indigenous people who has been murdered by the settlers, and there are all these cases have been impunity. So while we has been struggling on the domestic to see if there is any justice, the communities continue to get threatened, continue to increase the violence, and that is the purpose we has used the international mechanism. We went to the Inter-American Commission to ask for precautionary measure to protect the life and protect the integrity of my people. But we continue getting some kind of increase of violence. The Inter-American Commission gave 12 communities the precautionary measure in different stages that we had made the petitions, but the violence keep increasing. So we went to the Inter-American Court, and the Inter-American Court from those 12 communities gave us a provisional measure that Nicaragua ordered Nicaragua to protect indigenous people life, their territory, and their culture identity. But Nicaragua continues to not implement the Inter-American system protection measures. So we continue to also highlight these cases to the special procedures at the UN.
Thank you, Lottie. Christoph, perhaps I turn to you, given your rich experience working on social, economic, cultural rights around the globe. I would just love, and I think it will be valuable for the audience to hear your thoughts on what Lottie has presented, and to also see if you have a question for Lottie.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm very honored to be part of this panel. It's really honored. And no, I think that, I mean, we know all the fight of indigenous peoples and their communities in the last 20 years at least, no, or more, to have a declaration at the UN in 2007, and then your work at the national level to have these laws, and despite that, these achievements at the international level and at the national level, your communities are in this situation that's quite dramatic, you know. So I guess my the question I have, I think, is on the because you ask the Inter-American system to protect your life and the life of your community, and but do you also ask the regional system to protect your right to land, your right to food, other economic social rights that you have? We know the Inter-American Court recently recognized that the right to food and other rights can be protected by the court, not only via the right to life or the right to property, but also as an autonomous right. No. So what do you also expect someone from the regional system on this aspect to force? I mean, to help you to force Nicaragua to recognize your land rights, or even the right to food, or the right to education, to health, to housing, etc.
Yes, we as a human rights defender, we use the different special procedures of the Inter-American system, and we also is on the process to advocate on the UN system. But one of the things we do is also with the special repertoire for social, economical, and cultural rights, who see the rights of food, the rights of education, the rights of health, and the rights of a dignity house, and also the territories. We also reports and acts we has having systematically private meetings with the special repertoire for the what we call Redesca of the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights. We also meet with the special repertoire for indigenous people at the Commission of the Inter-American Commission. So we has also asked for public hearing to the Inter-American Commission to basically update the Inter-American Commission with the situation what my people are living, the stage, the situation what they live in day by day. But one of the main goal for us is to highlight the rights for territory and self-determination, because as indigenous people, we know that as human beings, we has our individual human rights, but the main demand my people ask me to do is the collective human rights, that is the territory, self-determination, and to maintain our identity. And that's why we has proceed with the international mechanism highlighting these items, but also the individual human rights violation.
Thank you very much.
Lottie, thank you. I'm thinking of what you said about communal rights to land, and Peter, you work at the nexus of resource governance, conservation, and social justice. Unsurprisingly, social justice is so closely linked to that. I am wondering if for our audience, you could perhaps say a little bit around that and how that applies to Nicaragua and what questions Lottie's presentation is raising for you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Anuradha. Indeed, it's an honor to be here, Lottie, as well. A big congratulations from my side to you, to your person, but also to your fellow colleagues and fellow people, the Miskito and other indigenous peoples in Nicaragua, for the important work you're doing. Indeed, the issues here are so paradoxical that for us, on the one hand, we see, as you stressed in the introduction, this whole issue of empowerment over the years, of winning court cases in the inter-American processes, and some recognition of the Miskito and others of territorial rights. At the same time, massive injustices and massive processes of violence. I mean, for us, it's very shocking to see someone like you, Lottie, and your fellow colleagues living under constant threat, fellow colleagues being under attack, indeed, high levels of insecurity, despite indeed protection measures from the inter-American system, despite also measures nationally. So, I mean, this is a growing injustice we're seeing not only in Nicaragua, but in so many countries. And my question to you, really, first of all, is what can we do in these kind of situations? You're faced with these serious threats against your own person, against your organization, against your community. How are these protection mechanisms functioning indeed? And what do you see as practical ways of strengthening them? Is it something also perhaps international attention like this award can be used to actually strengthen the protection measures for people like you who are standing up for the protection of the environment and their people?
Thank you for your question, and I would like to say that as a human rights defender, defending land rights, defending Mother Nature, but also the most human rights defender in Nicaragua has been threatened because of the crisis, the deep crisis of violation of human rights, what we are facing in these last years. And we must say that, yes, there is, we have seen that it has been noted that in Nicaragua, there is a gap between the international norms and the principles and environmental rights and human rights and the national legislations. And the international standards do not always automatically become part of the national legislation. Even then, even when they have been ratified by the state of Nicaragua, sometimes they are ignored by public officials as well as the jurisdiction of the regional court, or the national court, I mean. So as in Nicaragua, we don't have a mechanism to make a petition, or Nicaragua has not shown a political will to establish a resolution to protect human rights defenders. But also what we, the most thing we has been using is the Inter-American system, the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights and the Inter-American Court. In the case of us, 7 of my colleagues has a precautionary measure given by the Inter-American Commission, and myself and other colleagues, because our death threat and harassment has increased, we asked the Inter-American Court. And I would like to highlight my partners who struggle with my legal strategic, CEGIL, who are the Center for Justice and International Law, who works hand to hand with us to work in the Inter-American system. And with both of us has made this petition, and but well, we has tried to have private meeting and public hearing with Nicaragua government, with the Inter-American Commission and the Inter-American Court. Nicaragua government always has been absent to the public hearing at the Inter-American Commission, showing that there is no political will to dialogue and overcome together the solution of this situation. And in the Inter-American Court, well, we has asked for public hearing to supervise the implementation of the provisional measure. And this provisional measure will Nicaragua government has participate in the public hearing, but they has denied the legal representative of the human rights defender for the communities and also for us. For example, they has deported the attorneys from our partner CEGIL, who basically is in Costa Rica. They has deported them, and they has not accessed CEGIL to come down and meet with us and to be nearby the communities also, because CEGIL and CEJUDCAN, who is the Center for Justice and Human Rights, that is the organization I lead as a chair, both of us has made these petitions, and Nicaragua government has not showed the political will. One of the justification of the Nicaragua government to this mechanism is that we are not legal representative. But as you know, that everyone, every human being who has a right to have a legal representative, and they deny us as petitioners. They have said that the legal representative is the own indigenous authority who they design, who the Nicaragua government designed. And this is something that we also have been facing, and but we is still struggling with the legal strategy that we has brought Nicaragua with a case where a human rights husband was killed. This is Maria Luisa Costa. This is a human rights defender for indigenous people who is our partner. And in that case, we proved that her husband was murdered because there was an intention to murder her. And there was a lot of evidence. We took it to the Inter-American Court. There was a resolution. What the court has ordered Nicaragua to implement a mechanism to protect human rights defender. But unfortunately, the Nicaragua government has not demonstrated no political will, and they said that that case is closed and they don't want no international affair in the national decision.
So if I may briefly just ask you, in your case, though, with such a complex situation, what are your recommendations for next steps to move forward?
Well, in my steps, I have the provisional mechanism, and we will continue informing systematically to the Inter-American system and to the special rapporteurs of the UN to update them about the harassment and the threat, and that they could keep pressure on the Nicaragua government. And that is something that we is going to continue in the international mechanism of the Inter-American system, and also in the international mechanism of human rights at the UN.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lottie. If I may switch gears, I'm thinking it was 2 years ago that I had the opportunity to go down River Rio Coco with you and visit the communities who we are talking about today who face this violence. In the spirit of what you just described, Lottie, of the attitude of the Nicaraguan government, we had just a day before we went down with you and the lawyers representing the communities, the government delegation had gone down visiting the communities, trying to gather evidence against Sehut Khan and Sahil lawyers to discredit them at the Inter-American Court. So I got to meet with communities who were afraid, and they said that the government would come and take photographs and then go and tell the court that, look, we visited these people. These communities want to cohabitate with the colonos, the settlers. And so they were so afraid that, they don't have money to make t-shirts with their slogans. They had written saneamiento on pieces of paper and put on their clothes. And I'll never forget them telling me they can come take our photo, but they cannot tell the court what a demand is. So I'm wondering if you might say and explain to our audience this demand and struggle for saneamiento. And along with that, I think when we talk about the colonos, if you could touch upon some of the drivers of this land grabs that comes with violence, the non-state actors, the corporations that are involved. And if I might then turn it over to Christoph and to Peter Yu to talk a little bit about about the non-state actors and their responsibility when it comes to violations of indigenous land rights and human rights abuses. So Lottie, to start with you to explain to the audience what is saneamiento and some of the non-state actors that are involved in Nicaragua, along with the colonos that the government of Nicaragua is collaborating with, and then to hear from the two experts on the responsibility of the non-state actors in current human rights mechanisms that we have. Thank you.
For many years, Nicaragua state has denied indigenous people and Afro-descendants their rights to land and self-determination. So it has been a long struggle of my ancestors and many who has passed struggling that we could have guarantee our land rights and self-determination. And one of these struggles I want to highlight is that in the case of our stinging we brought to the Inter-American system in 2001, the Inter-American Court resolution ordered Nicaragua to create a mechanism to demarcate and title indigenous people land, even if the political constitution of Nicaragua did establish their recognition to indigenous people and to the communal property and all other type of property. But in the case of the communal property, there were no mechanism to demarcate and title indigenous people. So with that case, we had to negotiate. When we implement the court decision, we negotiate this mechanism to demarcate and title indigenous people land. It was not easy, that process. And in that process, well, in 2003, the National Congress approved, after a long national and local coalition between indigenous people, Afro-descendants of the whole Caribbean coast, get together to advocate and have one proposal. Well, we did get this law come out. We call it the regime of communal property. Establish 5 steps, and these 5, one of the last step, well, I'll just say quickly, the first step is that the community has to present their petition with a study where they demonstrate with the collective memory and ethnomapping that that is their land. Then the second step is, if there is any overlapping between the communities should get a friendly settlement. And if there is not a friendly settlement, the regional council give a resolution. The most of these cases is a common use. And then the third step is the process of what we call the putting we call it the mediation and the amojonamiento, where you put the borders of and then the fourth step is the government have to give the title. And the fifth step is what we call saneamiento territorial. We must recognize that the fourth step has advanced, but the fifth, in the 304 communities, I said, of the 23 territory, it had advanced, but none of these 23 territory has the government have not complied to implement the fifth step. And the fifth step is that the state of Nicaragua has refused to implement the final stage, because this final stage is the one what going to guarantee the protection of the communal land. And this final step is securing our territory, consists on the relocation of all non-indigenous person or corporation who have occupied illegally the territory. However, the state has not made concrete action to implement this. And there is where it had motivate the corporation, giving them concession and permission. And there is where we has experience, after getting the fourth step of the process of title, surprisingly, the indigenous people start to see this massive invasion of settlers, most of them armed settlers. And by that situation is why we has been demanding the government to implement that process. But the government, in addition, has found ways to circumvent the existing law through farming these communal, parallelly communal authority in those territories who have been resist this situation of disposition, because there are a lot of community has been facing a forced displacement. And that is the way how the government has been doing, motivating this corporation who comes, the corporation of mining and illegal exploitation of forests, ranch cattling, and there are other activities like what we call like the monocultivos, like palma africanas and others. We has a lot. So this is what we know, that even the independent research Oakland Institute did highlight us more, that what we wanted to have as evidence to show the government and show the different international community mechanism that the government don't have the political will to implement this last stage, what we call saneamiento territorial, because they are the one who is motivating the corporation. And indigenous people, what we call it is an internal colonization. And that's why we are afraid. The communities have fear of that the government commit ethnocide to indigenous people.
Thank you, Lottie. And since you called out, I will mention to the audience, if you would like to learn more about the struggle, at the Institute, we published a report called Nicaragua's Failed Revolution, the Indigenous Struggle for Saneamiento, and also highlighting the non-state actors, such as the gold mining companies, cattle ranching companies, and logging endeavors, and so-called forestry plantations, which get funding and financing from development agencies, including the World Bank, FinFund, FMO. So looking at that, I would turn over first perhaps to you, Christophe, given your expertise, what is the responsibility of the non-state actors? For instance, in this case, gold mining companies who say Nicaragua is the best country to work in. The doing business rankings of Nicaragua are very high for the World Bank. It gets financing for these projects on indigenous lands from agencies such as FinFund and FMO. Would they be responsible at all?
So the question of the responsibility of the companies' international law is a complicated one, but and it's improving, but it's very slow. So what we have since 2011 is principles. And these principles adopted by the Human Rights Council by unanimity say that the company should respect human rights. But then the problem is how it is monitored, and it's in many cases it's left to the company to do it. You have some states in which you can complain to national courts or local courts. In the US, in Canada, and we will vote on that in Switzerland on Sunday, in fact, to know if the population accept, we will be able to complain, and victims from other countries will be able to complain in Switzerland for negative activities and violations of human rights and the environment in other countries. But so that's quite complex. So what was happened in the last few years at the UN is that Latin American countries, with Ecuador leading the process, have asked for the UN to elaborate a binding treaty on corporations and their human rights obligations. And with lots of NGOs and social movement, we were expecting a lot from this process and had lots of expectations. And but what is happening is not very good. And what we have, it was the 6 weeks of negotiation a few weeks ago in Geneva. And the draft now is very weak. So it talks about the obligation of the state to protect the population and to regulate private actors, but no direct obligations of companies. And also we were expecting to have a monitoring body at the UN monitoring the violations of the companies, and that will not be, I think, created. So very disappointing exercise at the UN and negotiations for many years now. So I'm not sure it will improve. But so let's say that one way would be to have lots of initiatives at national levels to make sure that people from the victims can complain in the host state of the company. That's one of the ways to try to respond to this situation.
Thank you, Christophe. Peter?
Well, indeed, just to add on, I think it's a very important question, and exactly the kind of work that your organization is doing, and Anurada, is important as well to complement these kind of legal processes and so on. And because indeed, by exposing some of these situations, there is also an opportunity to call for cleaning up work by companies in their value chains. And so there's a lot of activities going on, which perhaps is a bit outside of only the legal realm as such, but may indeed help in these kind of cases. So I think that's very encouraging. And in terms of non-state actors there, we might also see the kinds of engagement from NGOs, obviously, both to clean up their own acts where they're involved in certain issues, but also to help support communities and engage. So, developments around pushing for due diligence, zero tolerance in the value chains is another initiative. I think are important efforts to complement broader legal discussions, and therefore, I mean, what we do see, and I was just, when I was listening to you, Lottie, is really this terrible situation of territorial insecurity. And not only that, but an ambivalent attitude by the state that sort of opens up the door for land grab, for other actors to come in. And there, I think, really, that's a deep democratic problem, of course, also, that points to the sort of the fragile situation of some of these wins for indigenous peoples in Nicaragua and elsewhere. And I do think that calls for a broader agenda, a broader also awareness raising, in fact, constant raising understanding about the importance of indigenous peoples for a given country that needs to accompany these processes. We can't just win the battle in the courts, nor that there is a need for a raising awareness about the issues, raising awareness within the countries and outside the countries to generate broader understanding. So that's my sense also, that we need to, and this is also what I hear from you, that there is this importance of telling the longer story, telling the story of the lives with your grandmother, and showing that this is not something that's just taking place in the courts. It's part of a longer history of life and being and living together. So
thank you.
Maybe do we still have time to open up?
Yes, I was gonna say that because we started a little bit late. I was told we can go another till 8-10 minutes. So with that, there are some questions that have come in, and there's a comment that one should acknowledge as we're talking about non-state actors. Nicaragua, which has seen huge amounts of deforestation, forests, which are primary forests, which are in the autonomous regions, which are the indigenous lands. It is interesting to know that the Global Climate Fund, despite advocacy efforts, do not authorize funds for the Nicaraguan government, which has its hand in deforestation, went ahead and authorized the monies to the Nicaraguan government. And as you pointed out, along with legal strategies, social mobilizations, advocacy, and international cooperation becomes even more important. There's a question here from the audience, Lottie, which is asking, is your community located within a national park or in the autonomous region on the coast? it might be helpful to perhaps just kind of again clarify what lands are we talking about.
Some of these communities are in protected area, but some are in indigenous territory. The majority of these communities I has mentioned, they are in indigenous territory, but we has a lot of them who are in the protected area. And I would just like to complement some things about the climate, the Green Climate Fund that I am very, very concerned about, because we had years trying to let the international community hear our voice and to understand that Nicaragua government has been these last 10 years in a new phase of extractivism activities, and which is centered in the mining and the expansion of the cattle ranch, and also in the monoculture such as African palm, the forestry. And there is no example, good example, that Nicaragua government could such show the international community a good practice of protecting the forest. There is a massive deforestation, and we has advocate to the Green Climate Fund, to the board of the Green Climate Fund. But Nicaragua always, government has his political strategic. So that is why the state has found always a farm to implement this parallel government, territorial government. This illegitimate government try to take control over the indigenous lands, giving these concessions, giving signs for the the Green Climate Fund, and also giving signature for the concession for exploitation as forests. This is another way that the Nicaragua state has come to take over land, and that's why our communities has been calling out there, trying to take out their voice to say how they are losing their territory, how they are being forced in a displacement. They don't have access to land. And the most thing, the Inter-American Court has asked Nicaragua to make a commission between the indigenous people, his legal representative, and the government's authorities to find a solution to implement concrete action to protect indigenous territory. But Nicaragua government has not implemented these concrete actions. Nicaragua government has used the most international financial organism to loan money to, they say, to implement action for the indigenous people, but we don't see it in the indigenous community. And I work in more than 97 communities, and I don't see no good example. I just see suffering and violence in my community. So We need that the international community understand that this is a humanitarian crisis for my people. My people have been losing their land, and we need Nicaragua government to comply with their obligation with indigenous people to the and show in the international community that they has been respectful with the human rights for indigenous people.
Thanks, Lottie. We're running out of time, and I do want to ask Peter and Christoph to have any last word. There is a question about if you have support from civil society groups and political party. For sake of time, you have already answered that you work with groups and individuals from Sahel to other organizations, but perhaps can you quickly say, Lottie, if you have any support from any political party, if you can keep it quick, and then I would turn it over to Christoph and to Peter for you to share any last thoughts. Lottie?
Well, one of my work is as a legal representative to my people is implement the legal strategy to use the international legal mechanism to obligate the Nicaragua state. But also I have to be creative because this is a long process. So one of them, the key creative thing we have to do is building partnership and coalition locally, regionally, and internationally. This is a key strategy for us to our survival. We call and to everyone to join us in partnership, but we doesn't work with political party. We want to clear that. We work with civil society partnerships, academics, universities, non-profit organizations, environmentals and socials, human rights, but we doesn't work with political party organization.
Thank you. How about you, Christoph, first? Wanted to see if you had any comments as we get close to our time.
Thanks. No, I mean, I guess the word I'm thinking of is solidarity. And so it was a great pleasure to know you, Lottie, and we should all be in solidarity with you and your fight and your community. I also hope that the UN mechanism can support, but do what they can. As you know, there was also special rapporteurs at the Inter-American level, but also in the UN, and many of them are, like in the American system, very progressive and supporting. So it's always been already been 20 years for you, I guess, but let's hope that it can be quicker to help you in the coming years and resolve that situation.
Peter?
Well, I would say it's unfortunately not surprising to hear about these climate initiatives may risk not respecting indigenous rights and potentially provoking further displacement and green grabbing. It's indeed deeply unfortunate, but at the same time, I think we have a big case here for actually mobilizing both NGOs and international agencies, which increasingly have adopted social safeguard measures. Indigenous rights are part of their, as you know better than I, Lottie, are part of their commitments. So let's now let them walk the talk on this and find solutions that actually enable constructive engagement on this in Nicaraguan case. I think here's a case to go back to your question, Anuradha, also about non-state actors, having them walk the talk on how you actually work with indigenous peoples in climate solutions rather than allowing for potential green grabs and displacement. So here, I think this is, it's unfortunate, it's discomforting, but I actually think that having you speak in forums like this one, Lottie, and raising the voice internationally, hopefully can help generate the support necessary to find a different way of doing it. It's a paradox that Indigenous peoples end up being displaced by green initiatives, and we need to find different ways of working. I think there's broad commitment to this, there's broad interest in this, but we also need to find practical ways of doing it. So thank you for raising that, and thank you again for having had the opportunity to speak to you. It's been a real honor. Thank you very much.
Well, could not have been said better, Peter. We have 2 more minutes, I've been told, and we want to conclude the 2 minutes. If I may ask another question, Lottie, which is, as a recipient of the Right Livelihood Award this year, this award, how does it impact your work as a human rights defender, and what message does it send to the community and the Nicaraguan government?
In first place, I want to I am very humble to receive this award, and it's very important for us, for the people of Nicaragua who are suffering a deep crisis of violation of human rights, but especially for Indigenous people and Afro-descendants people on the Caribbean coast, who has decades in extremely poverty, and for them, this is a opportunity that we could let the international community know that we exist as a human being, and we are there working to protect Mother Nature, not only for us as Indigenous people, but we are there to protect Mother Nature for all the world. And I express my gratitude to all the people who has been on this panel, who has been hearing me, but also to my panelists and to the Foundation of Rights Livelihood, who has been very supportive in making this happen. What we want to say to the world and to Nicaragua, that this award is to keep up our struggle to protect, to seek for social justice for my people. We hope that we have hopes, because our ancestor has taught us that we have to struggle for our land rights and to protect Mother Nature. And we has a hope that someday social justice will prevail.
Thank you, Lottie. Inshallah, on this Thanksgiving Day, not a better way to do it by joining the stewards of the land in this struggle. Thank you, Christoph. Thank you, Peter. And thanks to the Right Livelihood Award for hosting. And everyone have a wonderful evening or a good day wherever you are in whatever time zone. Thank you.